All right, let's talk to Mike. Mike is a person of undetermined gender from South Carolina who wants to discuss whether DNA was created or evolved. Ooh, that's a good question. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I was calling in to kind of get into it with y'all a little bit. The reason that I find the DNA interesting is that's when I was, I guess, an atheist. I didn't know I was really. I was just like, I don't really believe in God. I'd gone to church my whole life, but I didn't believe it, not really at all. And then got into DNA, and I was stunned by what was going on with DNA. It's actually information, and there's nothing like it in the world as far as, either something is alive and has DNA or it's a machine and people created it. There's nothing else. I mean, it was fascinating. And there's a lot that's going on with DNA that I found interesting. And also, that's my quick backstory, and I want to get into it, but I wanted to get your backstory, if you can. I would like to know who I'm talking to for a minute or two. Godlessengineer, if you could talk about how you became an atheist, or maybe you always were, just real quick. And also,
Godlessengineer, I'm going to step in right here real quick. Mike, respectfully, this isn't your show. So you want to discuss whether DNA was created or evolved. Let's just go right back to that. Okay? This isn't an opportunity to try to find the kinks in John's lack of faith. This isn't an opportunity to preach to the people in the audience who were on the fence. I don't know if that's what you're trying to do, and I don't want you to respond to this. I want you to tell me your opinion on whether DNA was created or evolved. And if you don't, then we got an issue. Okay? Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, geez, sorry. I think because of complexity of DNA, that it had to be designed. That's my opinion.
Okay, why? Why did it have to be designed? Because of its complexity.
It's the complexity is that underestimates what's going on there. It's amazing. It's like 6 billion. Talking about humans, they have 6 billion different little pieces, all those little rungs on the ladder of the DNA, and they have, we have 23 chromosomes. I got lots of questions about it. Maybe you have some answers. It's like, how do you get, it fits together like a zipper, DNA does. So how do you go from a 14 chromosome to a 15 to a 16? How does that work? If you got somebody with 14 chromosomes and they got some more DNA material, and then somebody else, they got to find somebody that exactly matches.
Well, so I can give you like a real world example of how the chromosomes change. Are you familiar with humans' chromosome 2? The fusion of like 2 different chromosomes and our other great ape cousins and ancestors fusing into 1 chromosome, therefore giving us 23 as opposed to the 24 or however many the other apes have.
Yeah, I mean, that's a can of worms, because now we have less chromosomes than apes do, but I don't think anybody would argue that apes are more complex than us. What's going on there?
Well, okay, so first of all, I do want to address the fact that I am doubting whether or not you actually have a lot of expert experience in the area of genetics and DNA and evolutionary biology. If you do have expert credentials in that, let me know. But this entire argument comes across as, all of this seems complex, therefore God must have done it. Would that be an incorrect way to describe your argument?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not saying all of this stuff is complex, it had to be a God. Maybe you can rephrase what your argument is so that it doesn't sound exactly like that.
Yeah, I mean, that describes a big picture, but complex doesn't begin. It's information is what I'm saying. DNA.
Define information.
You have to read it. You have to
define what it, I'm sorry. Wait, I hate it when people gish gallop, and I know you're not trying to gish gallop, but you brought up information. One of the biggest problems that creationists have is being able to define what information is, especially in the context of DNA. So please, could you please define what you mean by information in this aspect?
It's information in that you've got molecules, those 4 different molecules that make up the ladder of the DNA molecule. They're not doing chemical reactions. They're actually representing when they're strung together. So
let me get this straight. Hold on. I'm sorry for interrupting again. Let me get this straight. Deoxyribonucleic acid, a molecule itself that it uses chemistry and the laws of chemistry and physics in order to operate, does not use chemistry in order to operate? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it goes beyond chemistry into information, where the molecules represent like a 4-letter alphabet, if you will.
Okay, I mean, all right. So there's 4 different chemicals that can bind together in order to produce different sequences that we can then interpret into information, right? So you still have yet to define what information exactly is in this situation. Also, you are failing to point out like how this appearance of information or our interpretation of information sort of adds another layer of complexity onto chemical reactions.
Yeah, those chemicals, like adenosine or whatever they are, they're not doing chemical reactions. They're acting as markers, as digits. And then
they're not doing chemical reactions.
How does DNA, like, what does DNA do? Like, can you exactly explain to me like what the sequences that are in DNA? Can you tell me what those sequences are used to do?
The sequences are used to create proteins and more.
Right.
So they're actually, when they're lined up in a certain sequence, it's a certain type of protein. When they're lined up in another sequence, meaningless. Yeah. Most of them are meaningless. Like
right.
Almost all of them are.
And how do you think proteins come together? How do you think are proteins built out of magical like fairy dust, or is chemistry involved in order to build protein chains?
Okay, good sir. I am a chemical engineer. I'm very aware of the chemistry and all this. I'm saying that chemistry is representing digits, and those digits then are lined up in a certain way to make information. And most of the time, it'd be meaningless if it was random. I mean, like times 10 to the. I heard
no one said it was random.
Have to fold in on each other.
I mean, you're still failing to actually describe what information is in this context. Like, what are you calling information?
Information is the proper sequence of amino acids, or excuse me, of the ladders on the rung. That's information.
The proper sequence. This is I hate to break that one internet law, but this is saying that there's a proper sequence for things. I feel like is proposing that there's an actual way the sequence is supposed to be built in human DNA, when in reality, like, there's multiple different ways in which the sequence can exist. So there are certain sequences that produce certain proteins, and those proteins can affect the organism in different ways. We can tweak certain genes in order to have different effects. But I mean, you're still not actually telling me like about what information is in this particular context. Like, just because there's a sequence and this sequence has an effect, I'm not seeing a difference between chemical reactions and just your magical explanation you're going for here.
Okay, I got a question. Do you know the answer to what you're asking me, or do you really want me to answer it?
I mean, I can't tell you what you're defining as information.
Mike, honestly, Mike, John's asking I think you're talking past each other, but I think you aren't really listening to his question. He wants your definition. I think it's a broader question than maybe you are giving answers for. What is information? What is your definition of information as it pertains to DNA?
Wow. I'm going to ask you guys, can you field that? Because I think I know what I'm saying, but I mean, why don't you
try it one more time, Mike?
I don't know where you're going.
Mike, it's not a trick. It's a question. Please try to provide an answer. Just try it one more time, and we'll listen with beneficence to try to steelman what you're saying, okay? Because I think we don't get what you're saying. So try it again, honest.
Okay. Information is like letters on a page. They could be random, or if they're arranged in a proper way, then they're words that can be understood by something else. That's information. If they're arranged in the proper way, and you know how to speak whatever language that is, that's information.
Okay, would the molecule H2O, is that information?
Not in regards to a DNA sequence, that wouldn't apply. It only has.
Well, no. But no, it's a bunch of letters arranged in a certain way. And I'm not trying to be tricky about you, but it's information arranged in a certain way as human beings understand it, letters arranged in a certain way, that when put together gives you one water molecule, right? So that's not like DNA, but it's information, right? Any chemical formula, anything is information then by your definition, isn't it?
No. I can't believe we're talking about this.
Well, believe it or not, we are, Mike, because you define the DNA molecule as information because it has a bunch of letters that when spelled out in a certain way, representing, of course, the chemical compounds that it's made of, leads to a particular organism. But let's get simpler. Why isn't H2O also information that when put together in a certain way gives rise to a water molecule? How is that not information in the same sense to a simpler degree?
So I guess H2O is a very simple molecule.
Yeah.
The difference between H2O and DNA is DNA replicates, and those actual molecules, let's say it was full of H2O molecules, every third one or whatever, and then it's read by this really weird little teeny machine. I'd love to talk about that. Have you ever seen those? They're nuts. But they read it. So they cut it in half and they read it, and then they make another DNA molecule, or they just take chunks out and they'll make a protein of this or a protein of that as needed. And that's a whole other thing about how do you know which protein you need. But it's reading little chunks of your DNA and spitting out little parts that you might need somewhere. How they get there is more teeny little machines that drag them around, and they team up and they help each other. They're nuts, and they're really small. They're fun. But yeah, it's
right, which all operate by the laws of chemistry. So you're still not distinguishing like anything here. Like everything that you're saying is controlled by like the laws of chemistry and physics. So I'm not seeing where the magical wand is coming into.
Yeah, Mike, I don't think you think that those little machines, as you call them, have little eyeballs and little brains, and they're making little decisions to do that. They're operating based upon, like, just like John said, the laws of chemistry and ultimately physics, right?
Yeah, they have to. They're in our world. They have to operate by chemistry and physics. But a machine that we make, like a car, will operate much differently than a pile of metal does. And a living thing operates much differently than a bunch of water molecules just sitting there in the glass.
I would hope so, because I don't want to take a water molecule to work. These are different types of things that exist. You're comparing not even apples and oranges. You're comparing a chunk of calcium to a 747 in that sense. But ultimately, we are still talking about molecules. We're talking about chemistry, and we're talking about ultimately physics and the laws thereof, right? So why does any of that require a divine intelligence or consciousness or any of that? I still don't see the room for it.
Because the reason it requires an intelligent design or something to make like a DNA molecule, even the simplest one, is because there's so many sequences that are meaningless. It actually rounds down to zero, the odds of it being able to create a molecule that's 23 genes. It's impossible.
It's always interesting to me to hear somebody that obviously doesn't know anything about statistics try to claim that there's zero possibility of something happening. And I feel like that's what you've just described here, is just that you don't know how statistics work, or how you would even go about figuring out like the likelihood of DNA to develop. I mean, for one thing, we know that it did develop, right? And in the origin of life research that has been out there, we may not have every single like step in the process, but we do have enough to know that it was a natural process. And considering in the past about how many things that we've attributed to a god or the divine has later then been explained naturally, it seems like the most likely conclusion for any of this is that it is a natural phenomenon. Like, that's the reasonable explanation. But you're coming in and being like, nah, bro, but there's magic. And I don't understand how DNA works. Therefore, magic seems to be a better explanation.
I do understand how it works. It's just there's so many combinations that are random that it's like 10 to the 74th zeros. And I'm sorry to offend you and say you can round that down to zero, but that's like many more times than there are molecules in the universe. You can at some point say, 14 billion years, if the universe is that old, there is no time for that, even if you're doing it trillions of times.
How do you know that, Mike? That's quite a claim.
Johnny, he's taking notes from Frank Turek. Like I feel
right?
From the goo to the zoo to you is coming any second now.
You know who Frank Turek is, Mike?
Have you?
From South Carolina?
Yeah, I like Frank Turek a lot. Yeah, he's good.
Well, that's probably a good thing, but so I guess your argument is that this is essentially irreducible complexity, and you can't figure out how natural means could produce a DNA molecule. Therefore, you go to a supernatural cause for the existence of a DNA molecule, a supernatural cause that we've never been able to identify, that is not subject to those laws of chemistry and physics and biology that everything that we've seen seems to be subject to. But you're positing then, therefore, a realm of supernatural existence that is not beholden to any rules that set all this in motion and guides it, right?
Yeah. Well, irreducible.
Well, you don't like the way I phrased it, but
I think
right?
That's a valid one. I would say that. I mean, I hate to agree to a long statement like that, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Mathematically, the odds of this happening are so close to zero, it's not good.
Okay. Well, and that's something worth exploring then, Mike. And I'm sorry, everybody in the chat who's going to have a problem with the fact that I just cut him off, because we've heard these kind of arguments 5,000 times. I'm going to go straight to that. You've done the statistical analysis, it sounds like. So I'd like you to, in layman's terms, because I didn't take statistics. I'm a coward. I didn't take statistics. So I'd like you to please explain what method you used, what statistical method you used to employ to do the analysis on the likelihood that DNA arose from natural processes that didn't arrive at natural processes. Go ahead, explain it step by step. Walk us through, because you've done it, obviously. I haven't, and I want to know.
Okay, I've got two questions for you. If I explain it to you, would you understand it?
If you explain it right, I'll understand something. So go ahead and explain it. Explain it. Hey, can I get the clock? Rick, Mike, give me a second. I want the clock, the 60-second clock. Explain it to me like I'm a child clock. Let's get it up. Let's get it up. Come on, folks. Go, Mike, go. Explain.
All right. No pressure here.
All right.
The odds are so large, and the number of times that you're taking a swing at it are so small that you can round it down to next to zero. How's that?
Okay, the odds are so large, and the number of times you're taking a swing at it are so small that the odds are next to zero. Okay. Again, having never taken statistics, because let the record reflect, I'm a coward. How did you determine that the odds were so large?
Well, this is not Frank Turek. The proteins that are required in the human body, the odds of one of those appearing on the human DNA is 10 to the 74th, where it has to be in the proper sequence so it'll fold. You can't just have any protein. And 10 with 74 zeros behind it is such a big number that the odds of it happening by random chance in our timeline of 14 billion years, actually, how old do they say the planet is? 5 billion when you had life?
Okay. Can I let me ask this question, and I think that this will really kind of elucidate what we're talking about here. Can you please tell me how many chemical reactions occurred prior to the first living cell?
Well, you'd have to make an estimate on that. And then, you got to do the lightning thing.
Okay. Give me your estimate. What's the estimate that you're working with in order to make this determination? You must have a number. What's the number? How many chemical reactions occurred on the face of the earth prior to the first living cell showing up?
The answer is, I don't know.
And come back next week.
Okay. Next, what I want you to do is Google or, get something or do something. Look up what pigeonhole theory is. Have you heard of that before? You're an engineer. I'm sure you have.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Okay, do you know what the pigeonhole theory is?
No, I don't.
Okay, imagine, close your eyes, right? Imagine with me that you have 13 doves, right? And you have a wall that has like holes in it, but there's only 12 holes. Tell me exactly how many of those holes will contain 2 doves. Well, pigeons, I guess, to work with it.
The thing where you pull them out. Yeah. So I just
no.
The spoiler at the end.
Okay, well, if you, I'm changing to pigeons, by the way, because it's pigeonhole theory. If you have 13 pigeons and 12 holes, you're definitely going to have at least one hole with 2 pigeons in it. That's 100% likelihood. So how this translates to what we're talking about with chemical reactions and the early Earth and origin of life is that as long as you have a big enough set of like chemical reactions or a big enough set of instances for something to happen, there's 100% likelihood that it will happen at least the one time. So we know that it did happen at least one time, and if it happened one time, it can happen again in another area. Then if you compare that to the number of possible life-supporting planets that exist in the universe in general, you'll find that your seemingly large number, put in that particular context with all the chemical reactions that are going on in the entire universe, it makes it 100% likely that it would come out as just a happenstance sort of thing, that life would appear naturally on its own without the need for a wizard.
Yeah, the difference between our theories is you had 13 pigeons and 12 holes. I'm thinking there's trillions of holes and one lame pigeon. It's like, well, it could happen, but how much time you got?
when was the last time you looked up as to like how many possible life supporting planets there probably are? Because I can guarantee you it's not one planet, which I feel like is what you're trying to say here, is that there's one planet that can support life, and the chances of life showing up on that one planet is next to zero. If that was the reality of the situation, you might have an argument. But the fact that there are multiple different planets, like in the terms of trillions, billions, I could Google it myself right now. It's a really quick Google. Like all of this can be easily solved with like a Google search or something. Like I'll do it right now. How many possible life supporting planet, type with me now, supporting planets are there? Let's see. Scientists estimate there could be 60 billion planets in the Milky Way alone that could be in the habitable zone of their local star. And that's just in the Milky Way galaxy, right? Now you want to talk about like in the universe, we're talking 50 sextillion, right? Kind of really puts your large number argument into perspective, doesn't it?
Well, you know what? I'm going to take that number and I will get back to you. I think you're going to be stunned that when you put 74 zeros on something, it takes a billion, which is
I am never surprised by a Frank Turek argument because he's had the same shtick for about 25 years or more, and he plays to that at every single university that you've probably seen him at.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm not just
Mike. Notwithstanding that, you said you enjoyed Frank Turek's work. Have you? So it sounds like you've read his work and maybe watched some of his videos. Maybe you even saw him in person. How familiar are you with the criticism of Frank Turek?
Pretty familiar, I would think, because I've seen a number of his debates with like Hitchens and Silverman. I've seen him. Yeah.
With who?
There's a lot of criticism going on there. There's a lot of criticism going on there in a debate, which is actually, those are pretty good.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's never pretty good for Mr. Turek. He's there, but that's just my opinion. And well, it sounds like you believe, therefore, that because the DNA molecule is so very complex, and you can't imagine how it could have developed through natural processes, that therefore you accept the existence of a supernatural existence. Can you tell me a little bit more about the nature of that supernatural existence? I'm curious.
You can't get anything from a DNA molecule. All I'm saying is it's plausible, since it looks like it's information that we couldn't even define that word, which is kind of frustrating, but it looks like there's information in the DNA molecule that it's plausible that it didn't develop on its own. There's just too much information for it to randomly occur.
Okay, so what caused it to develop then in your philosophy?
Well, I quite frankly, when I was an atheist and I saw DNA data, and then you got to read it too. It's not just it randomly appears. Now you've got to split it in half. How does that happen? Then you got to read it. How does that happen? And then you've got to when you need it.
I'm sorry. I really don't mean to laugh at this, but like all of this is explained through the laws of chemistry, because deoxyribonucleic acid is a chemical, and like how it's read and all of the operations that go on with DNA as well as other chemicals out there are explained in like chemistry classes. Like it all follows the same basic laws of chemistry. So I guess the real question here is, how does DNA violate the laws of chemistry?
It's not violating the laws of chemistry. It's following information. which is a whole different.
Okay, so now we're into a God of the gaps kind of argument here, is how I feel it, because like basically you're saying, well, no, DNA follows the laws of chemistry. DNA is made up of chemicals. DNA has chemical reactions and produces different things just like any other chemical would, and follows all of the natural laws of everything that we understand as far as chemistry goes, but it needs God because of what?
Well, because it's intentional. It's creating what it needs to survive.
Intentional? Are genetic disorders intentional? Like, is that the intent of God, is for genetic disorders to exist?
No, he doesn't.
Why?
I'm
Then why? Why
He
do
doesn't
they
do a good
exist?
job of it. So he's not all powerful.
Oh, may I answer that question?
Yeah,
May I answer that?
please.
I'll do it briefly. God creates perfect world. We come here, we mess it up, and there's some. Now it's perfect, quite frankly.
I love it.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got to stop you right there. So basically, the reason why genetic disorders exist and like genetic diseases and all that exist is because a woman ate a fruit salad at some point in our history, and God didn't like that none. So therefore, He gave a Timmy in like 1995 bone cancer. I feel like that's what you're saying.
Hey, Mike, that is kind of what you're saying in a way, but I talked about this on my last show, and I have to chime in on this one. Fuck your concept of a God. My friend just lost her 23-month-old kid to leukemia. All right. God created a perfect world, but because God created this world so flimsily, so poorly, like a house of cards, plaster of Paris, glass cannon, such a shoddy job, what a crappy craftsman God is, that because through sin and a failure to obey commands, a 23-month-old kid died before that kid got a chance to experience much of life, and his parents are stuck with that for the rest of their lives too. And that God is also good. So, or is God all knowing and all powerful, but not all good? What is thy response?
All right. First of all, if somebody lost somebody recently or whatever, I'm not going to say any of this stuff. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
You're not here.
But
I'm here.
you guys.
Say it to me.
Oh, okay. Because that's awful. But
Yeah. If only God created a world where kids don't get leukemia.
well, he did create a world where they don't get leukemia, and there will be a place where nobody gets leukemia. We're in between.
If only God could have created a world where kids don't get leukemia and then kept it, kept renewing the license on it so that kids still don't get leukemia, right? So you're telling me that God so loved the world that He created the universe so that 6,000 years later, because of the course of sin that happened, a kid dies of leukemia, and that's fair and just and loving and efficient.
This is us running our sin-filled world. God could be in charge, but He's letting us run it. There it is, free will, and we suck at it. And God will run it in the end.
We could still have free will, Mike, couldn't we? Here's an old yarn for you. Is there free will in heaven?
In the final heaven, I don't know, because I've actually said, pray to God.
Is there free will in heaven now?
People, I give up my free will. I just want to do the right thing, and my nature is every once in a while.
Me too, Mike.
And it's
me too, Mike.
I'm done. I just want to do the right thing.
Me too, Mike. I try to do the right thing too, but my question stands. Is there free will in heaven?
My honest opinion is that I don't know.
Oh, you don't know if there's free will in heaven, but you're more than willing to say that it's impossible for natural processes to give rise to DNA. Why can't you just say you don't know? Why do you have to posit that there's a supernatural intelligent designer who also doesn't give a crap about children dying of leukemia? Why are you so okay with saying you don't know here, but you're not okay with just saying like we do? We don't know how it works, but we're not willing to assert, to use Godlessengineer's phraseology, wizards. We don't need space wizards. We can just say, we don't know. Why can't you just say, you don't know?
Well, don't know what? How DNA appears, or what do you think?
Yeah, we can't fathom. Our brains, our little meat bags inside of our bone balls on our head can't grasp trillions and billions and quintillions of chemical interactions and time of that scale, right? But you think that you've latched on to, I don't know, like some factoid about the universe, and it's a God that cares about us and sets the universe in motion, and you're willing to go to bat for him for creating a perfect world, but then letting the perfection lapse such that a single one child dies of childhood leukemia, and it's because we did it wrong. Mike, that is shameful, don't you think? On your part, and on the part of that God that you believe in. Don't you think it's embarrassing to have a creation as magnificent and as detailed as the universe is, right? But to not dot your I's and cross your T's and prevent small children from getting leukemia. Let them stub their toe. Let their parents, I don't know, yell at them once or twice because they didn't get an A on their homework, and then the parents have, remorse, and then they can go ahead and teach their children to work harder and apologize and not lose their temper. But kitty leukemia, your God is absent at best, and repugnant by any human standard. Can't you see that a God like that is detestable, disgusting, and not worth your adoration?
I absolutely agree with you. If this was heaven and God was running a shit show like this, but this isn't heaven. This is us running the show. And then in heaven, there won't be any of this. God sees going.
I ain't running shit, Mike. I didn't kill my friend's kid. My friends didn't kill their kid. The kid got sick, and then within 1 month was in the M&F'ing grave. The parents, wonderful people. The friend group, fantastic. I talked to her just the other day. She fed that kid healthy food. All right? Healthy food, the stuff she wouldn't eat herself. She saved it for her kid. And somehow, somebody on the other side of the world saying, "Goddamn," and someone on the other side of the earth, I don't know, gambling and having adultery and, kicking their dog. No offense, Vin. And all this other stuff. That's the world that God's like, well, you know what? I could intervene, but it's theirs. I'm letting them take the reins. And therefore, it's fair. Therefore, like, hey, hands off. Why couldn't God intervene and prevent any child from getting childhood leukemia?
He will intervene. It's called heaven. I don't know what to tell you, and I definitely am not the person to talk to these people and say everything's going to be okay. I'm not doing that. But because that's awful, what you described.
I know it is awful, Mike. I appreciate the sympathy on that one. And you talk about heaven. All right. Why not just make this heaven? You open the door on that one. Why not just make this heaven? Why create a world where children can die of leukemia? Why? Why do it? Just make it heaven. Unless God's sick.
May I answer that?
Unless God isn't as powerful as we like to think he is, or unless this is just physics and chemistry and there is no heaven. Why even bother? Why create a demo, like an alpha version of existence? That's what this world is then, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're beta testing it. We're alpha testing it. I don't know. I'm not a science guy, but why not just create heaven right off the bat?
He did create heaven. Well, that's a good question. He created heaven right off the bat. And then people chose to do whatever they wanted to do. And he offered free will. And you're going to decide in your lifetime.
Well, no. So that's a little bit off from what, the Bible teaches. Because the Bible teaches like two people at most are the people that chose to disobey God. And then everybody else was affected by their decisions, right? So like, it's not even there's, somebody in my neighborhood is doing something wrong, therefore that's why I have diabetes, right? Like that, it's more like, oh, a woman decided to disobey God and have a fruit salad 6,000 years ago, and that has then affected everything beforehand. And typically how I understand this, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong there, Mike, but my understanding is that God created reality to be perfect. And then, people or Eve dissented from God and then convinced Adam to dissent from God. And then that literally changed the whole physics of reality. Like the physical laws of reality completely changed. And that's what we are paying penance for now, is somebody decided to disobey God 6,000 years ago. Would that accurately describe your position?
Yeah, I don't like it, but they call that original sin. And I don't understand how Adam sinning X number of years ago affects me, but apparently it does.
Maybe it doesn't, Mike. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Can I ask you this? You don't understand it, but, God works in mysterious ways or doesn't exist at all.
I don't like it.
When you imagine, if you will, you're on a long, lonesome road, and you just pull off out of a gas station. You got a full tank. I think it's Utah. Maybe it's Utah. Where's that big old like Devil's Canyon thing? Whatever that thing that's in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Whatever it's called. Folks in the chat, you got this. You got me. And it's a long road, and you got yourself a pretty nice car, okay? And you pull onto the road and you put in 55 miles an hour and you set it straight and you drive, right? And let's say the wind blows, things outside of your control. The wind blows or an animal gets in the way or I don't know, forces take place in some way where you're a little bit off kilter. Would a responsible driver course correct and maybe steer the steering wheel a little bit, get back on track? Would a responsible driver put their hands back on the wheel a little bit and steer it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's just some meatbag driving a car. A God, Devil's Tower, Wyoming. Thank you, Zach Benson. Much love. So a God is infinitely a better driver than humanity and has a much more glamorous vehicle, diamond encrusted, gold wheels. Why can't that God see that, oh, man sinned? Uh-oh, little course correction. Okay. Let me do something. And before you say, he did course correct, Johnny, he course corrected 2,000 years ago when he sent his only son, who gave cryptic messages to people and spoke in a pre-telecommunication era and told them that whoever believeth in him shall find eternal life. That eternal life message doesn't do a damn thing for the kid who's dying of leukemia, for the person who's at the mercy, and the flood. Thank you, Maltese Falcon. The flood. He does these course corrections. They're crap course corrections. They're bad. If I'm an author, I could course correct so that my characters get back on track without overwhelming their free will. I could course correct every day. I could make the child molester intangible whenever they wanted to molest a child. I could make the starving kid have a full stomach. I could do all kinds of stuff, and humans could still be miserable to each other. And I could just neuter all of their little miserable actions. I could do that in my imagination as an author. Why can't God, who's infinitely more imaginative than me, do that in the real world? He doesn't. So either he doesn't care, he can't do it, it doesn't exist. Which is it?
He's trying to, may I answer? That's an interesting, and that was a long story.
It always is. It always is. And I said I was going to talk less, didn't I, John? I said I was going to talk less. So go ahead.
Okay.
I'm trying. Go on. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Is a course correction. Yeah, bring in Jesus. That was a course correction. That was actually a guide more than anything else. And then he does have little things with angels and Holy Spirit. You hear all these little stories. I've never experienced anything like that. But he does mess with, if he messes with it too much, then you're losing your free will and you got this big God hanging over your shoulder. Is that really a choice? You got God.
Did the devil have free will in heaven?
Do good things, he rewards you. I'm sorry, what's that?
Did the devil have free will in heaven?
Yes.
Okay. So God, and is there suffering and death in heaven?
No, he cast. We're version 2.0 for you engineers out there. The angels were made first. They had a rebellion. They had a rebellion, and then they got thrown out of heaven, and they made us. But we're different from them. We're like in his image, not quite understanding that. We're like children of God. We're not just stuff he made. Yeah. And then we're still with 2.0, and then there'll be a heaven at the end, according to the Bible. So I'm just saying this is according to the Bible.
Mike, you're carrying a lot of water for this God that I don't think we have any real good reason to believe exists, even though there's a whole bunch of odds telling us about chemicals in our DNA. And also a God that's pretty crappy at being a story writer. Well, I think Stephen King would do a better job of that. I know I would if I sat down to create a universe. John, you got any last thoughts?
Not really. I don't know. I had one thought, but I've lost it. And I don't know. I'm totally, I guess for this entire call, I'm just not convinced by any of the stuff. Like I know too much about statistics to be convinced by the statistical argument. And I don't believe that magic is needed for chemicals to operate. So I'm totally unconvinced by everything in this call.
Mike, thanks for calling and listening to us. I hope that we gave you something to think about. And we're going to let you go. So you take care. And I think that you're better than your God. I think that you do a better job with children.